Hi guys, this is lesson 2 of the 12-week beginner sequence. So just to review from last week, we talked about how to establish your stance with the shoulder width feet apart, stepping out, turning in the back foot about 45, weight pretty evenly balanced. We talked about the 3 steps. You have your gather step, your passing step, and your offline step. We talked about the 4 basic guards, which is your bum tog, your ox, the plow, and your alber. And we talked about the guard flow, how to flow between those 4 guards, moving forward and then back. And then we talked about the overhow, the overcut, and the straight parry, how to defend yourself against the overhow. So like I said last week, we try very hard to review and then add a little something. And every week we review and we add a little something. So the additions for this week are going to be 2 more guards in our guard flow and then Unterhaus, right? Rising cuts, the undercuts. So if we start in bum tog, we roll over into ox, and then we turn our hips and thrust, and we recover into the other ox. We drop down to plow, turn our hips and thrust, and recover to the other plow. And we step forward and we drop to alber. That's the guard flow that we had last week. Let me back up from the camera a little bit. The 2 additions are we're going to step forward and extend out to long point. So from alber, we're just going to step forward and extend straight out to long point. And then the next one is probably the toughest one people learn initially. It's the hanging guard. So we're gonna pass forward again. We're gonna roll up like we're going to ox. And we're gonna keep rolling over until we are looking under our quains, and now we are in the hanging point. And I'm gonna step forward again, and I roll back up to bum tog. So let me go through that whole thing for you. So we have above our head for the bum tog, ox, ox, plow, plow, alber, long point, hanging guard, back up to bum tog. And again, for beginning students, we would spin around and do this going forward again. When students are more comfortable with that, we'll have them going forward and backwards. So if I was drilling this on my own and I felt comfortable with it, I might start bum tog, ox, ox, plow, plow, alber, long point, hanging guard, bum tog, ox, ox, plow, plow, alber, hanging guard, long point to hanging guard, back up to bum tog. So that is guard flow number 2. For Unterhaus, most students seem to have trouble with the Unterhaus. So what I do is I have them start in bum tog, and what I tell them for the right bum tog, so your left foot is in front, your bum tog, you're gonna let your sword roll until your knuckles are touching your thigh. So from here, we're just gonna roll, knuckles are touching the thigh. Some of the common mistakes people have is I see them push with their lead hand, and so their lead hand ends up in front of their backhand, and it kind of messes up their structure quite a bit. So what I tell people is imagine somebody's holding onto your sword from the point, and you have to pull that sword out. That forces you again to use the hips and pulling, and I'll even sometimes have them take their lead hand off and pull and step. And that will make sure that you have to have that good pulling structure. And if you look, my elbow is above my ear. One of the things I see people do a lot is they try to scrunch up and do this, and that, they shove their lead hand ahead of their wrist. Often they lean back, their wrist is messed up. So your elbow does have to go up above your ear. So again, remember, we're gonna pull through. So now I'm in what Meyer might call unicorn, right? This is one of the other secondary guards. So from here, we just had our knuckles on our right thigh. Now we're gonna take our fingers to the left thigh. And then the same thing, I'm gonna imagine somebody's pinching the tip of my sword, and I need to pull it out of their hand. And now this elbow needs to make sure it comes above. And now I'm in unicorn on the other side. And then knuckles to the thigh, pull through, fingers to the thigh, pull through. Again, if you're a new student, you just do this forward. But if you're more comfortable going backwards, pull through, fingers, pull through, knuckles, pull through, fingers, pull through. So we've done the guard flow number 2 with the 2 extra guards, the long point and the hanging point. We have worked on our Unterhaus. So now we should have our Overhaus and our Unterhaus, which are probably the most important cuts. And then we talk about how to defend the Unterhaus with the straight parrying position. So when Meyer talks about defending undercuts with the straight parry, One of the things he talked about in general with the straight parry is that we shouldn't be leaving too much, right? With the rapier, it actually says you should stay within a hand's breadth of your center with the straight parry. So with the long sword, you might move a little bit more, but we definitely don't want to be doing things like this. So the straight parry is going to turn. We're still going to turn our long edge and point at the attack that's coming. We're going to parry things that are about waist and up. So it might be a rising cut, but it's still going to be going for our hips or our armpits or our flank or maybe an elbow. Especially if you're chicken winging, they might throw a rising cut at your elbow. So we're just going to turn the long edge into that. We're not going to go very far. If the cut is going much lower, we should really be stepping back to void the cut and then smacking them in the head or the arm. So we want to use distance management. But if we are parrying a rising cut to any target, we're still going to make sure that we're turning the long edge into the cut, and the point's going to deviate just a little bit to either side. And that's really about it. We reviewed the things that we handled last week. We introduced the 2 more guards in the guard flow, so now we have a 6-position guard flow, and we talk about the Unterhau, the rising cuts, and we talk about how to apply the parry that we already know, the straight parry, towards those rising cuts. And again, we spend probably 2 hours on that, and that is lesson number 2 in the 12-week beginner sequence.